Now starting, turning medical textbooks into quirky comic books. A speaker presentation by Stephen Christian, an AR developer, immersive storyteller, and third-year PhD student in integrative neuroscience.
Hello, everybody. My name is Stephen Christian. I am a MD PhD student at the University of Nevada Reno. I'm also an immersive storyteller and a business owner, and just a overall, I like to make cool stuff and put it on the internet and teach people how to do stuff. And I was doing that for a while, when I was playing football in college and, post football and everything. And it has somehow followed me into the immersive space, whether it's augmented reality or virtual reality. And I'll be talking a little bit about sort of what that process has been like in that journey through the work that I do now. And so this presentation is focused on, a lot of the things that I've learned and a lot of the insights that I've had over the past, 3, 4, 5 years being in medicine, and how I found ways to turn a lot of the medical education stuff, whether it's in textbooks or whatever, into comics that are a lot more accessible because it's more about, one of the things that I found with being in medicine is that everything is about stories. Everything is about understanding the mechanisms or, the beginning, the middle, and the end of whatever happens, whether it's a disease progression or a mechanism that leads to some sort of actionable step. But it's all storytelling. And if you put a cute little character and you tell these stories that are based in science, and you tell them with an approach of a like character-driven narrative, then they're not only a lot more accessible, but they're also they're just easier to understand and easier to share and talk about. And so we will sort of, hopefully by the end of this, you will have a better idea of what is possible. And so let me try to get this. And so like I said, I'm a medical student. I'm a PhD student in the integrative neuroscience program as well. My background is mainly in athletics. As a college, Division I college football player, I played at the University of Hawaii and Oregon State. And after retiring from playing football, I became an animator for about 5 to 10 years. And then from there, COVID hit, and I got into the online education space, got into the immersive space, and then ultimately I got into medical school. So I kind of had to leave that behind, still do a little bit of stuff on the side, but not to the extent that I used to. And while I was playing football, I ended up getting a Master of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies. And I think that really laid the foundation for a lot of the work that I do now, because it's very interdisciplinary in nature. And what many people often don't recognize or realize is that being in the immersive space, being in augmented reality and virtual reality, whether you're a developer, a creator, a creative technologist, you are interdisciplinary in nature. And so it requires you to carry a lot of hats, and you often have to navigate the nuances of specific disciplines in order to do the work that you do. Most of my work is in visual storytelling and animation. And so you really see that in my work, even if it is very tech heavy. And so, to sort of go down that journey, played football from California, moved to Hawaii, and then from there went through the rigmarole, ended up having hip surgery, which was interesting. And that forced me into, looking how to explore avenues that go beyond me playing football, go beyond me using my body to, pursue opportunities. I ultimately, found my way back to the field after recovering from my second surgery, ended up at Oregon State. And from there, it started to allow me to explore what this interdisciplinary work could look like in practice on a day-to-day basis. And then from there, sort of had some ups and downs, and ultimately was just like, I'm not trying to be a real adult right now, so let me just go to medical school. And that ended up working out for me in one way or another. But from that point, it's been all about, how do I combine the the empirical, the empirical research with the innovative nature of tech, and be able to create patient-centered experiences that are focused around storytelling and connecting. And that whole journey I sort of took you through, I essentially call the millennial plight. And I think that this reality that I had, where I hold a whole bunch of skill sets, and I pursue a lot of opportunities to solve problems, that has really drove me to continue doing the work that I do, and also being able to pull from these various experiences so that I could create impactful work, whether it's as a medical student, a comic creator, a mentor, a skateboarder. All those things sort of you see all those elements in the work that I do. And so prior to medical school, what I did is I wanted to find ways to tell character-driven stories, and ultimately find ways to talk about different elements of the human condition that we all sort of feel and know, but often are really hard to sort of spot and see. And often those conversations can be very hard in certain areas. And so through comics and storytelling and creating characters that go through these different things that are appealing to people, you're able to explore those different aspects of vulnerability and what really makes us tick in these like wholly unique ways, right? And so ultimately, this series, Island Fever, is sort of like my passion project that I've worked on for the past 10, 15 years. And through that process, I produced 8 books. And so I've drawn over 1,000 pages of story. I put the work in to find a way to like hone that skill and develop a way to communicate that goes beyond me, speaking to people one-on-one, or being in a clinical setting and having to do a diagnosis one-on-one with somebody. Because often people are looking for guidance and answers, and they often are, trying to find ways to be as discreet as possible, and sort of, especially within their health and stuff. So, it's always funny to me, like my series is called Island Fever, and I'm in medicine, and it's often hard for people to make those connections, but the series is centered around essentially, an island that has a fever, and it's up to the main character to, figure out the source of the fever, and essentially, find the cure for it. And so with that, like my current medical research, going from, the stuff that I was doing prior into the stuff that I'm actually doing now, I'm actually using, emerging technology, and it's a combination of virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and augmented reality to find ways to improve health literacy and education. And so through that, I'm exploring accessible ways to measure and assess neuroocular diseases and concussions and all that stuff, and being able to create experiences that allow you to study spatial disorientation or human perception and manipulate human sensory input. And so it gets really, really dicey in this interesting way, but it's all about like using the hardware and the software to create experiences that allow you to learn about yourself, or learn about other people, or learn about the human condition. And so what that looks like in practice is, essentially core game development tenets, and being able to create stuff that will give you an experience, and you could track it with your eyes and your face, and do all the different things. I'll put out a CSV file, and you can do data analysis and use Python and all that stuff, right? So it's for me on a day-to-day basis, I get to make like mini games and base those mini games in science, and really develop insights from that by having somebody play a game. And so one of the things that I found, right, sort of leading up to this point, is that, like medical education is very, very antiquated, right? Because you saw sort of where I started in terms of visual storytelling, and you see where I'm at now, where I'm actually being able to implement stuff and measure concussions and do all that stuff in, somewhat pseudo clinical settings. But it took a while for me to get there, right? And part of it is because everything is so heavily focused around in medicine, everything is so heavily focused around being able to pass a multiple choice exam that that forces you to approach things in a way that is very antiquated. And so for me, it was just like there's a lot of buzzwords, there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of things that are very much removed from my day-to-day lexicon and just, in general, what I've been exposed to up until this point. And I realized that ultimately what they're trying to get us to understand is all this information we need to know. They're just a series of stories about how the body works and what people have found from their exploration of the body, right? Whether it's disease progression or all that stuff, right? But it's all stories at the end of the day. And so with this whole journey of trying to figure out how to study and memorize things, it's all about how do you effectively communicate very dense topics and get people to, make actions towards understanding those topics the best way possible, the most efficient way possible, right? And so you have these large blocks of text, and it ultimately has to translate to you knowing how to navigate a third order multiple choice exam. And so with it, I'm just like, okay, I'm a visual storyteller. I'm a storyteller. How do I make this make sense, right? And so for me, the insightful thing is medicine being storytelling, there's always going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And for every story that I've done and the 8-9 books that I've created, it's always approached it that way as well. And so being able to tie those two directly has been really interesting for me. And so one thing in particular, which I thought was really interesting, is that one of the main contributing bacteria for acne is actually a bacteria called Cutibacterium acnes. And what that bacteria is it's a gram-positive bacteria that essentially gets into our skin or under our follicles. It lives on our skin, but it gets into our hair follicles, and we essentially have an immune response, and that is what contributes to us having like acne. And if it gets worse, then you have acne vulgaris or cystic acne. I ended up having a multiple choice question about that on one of my board exams, and the reason why I knew it is because I ended up making a comic about it, because I just thought it was like, oh, Cutibacterium acnes, right? And so, I sort of sounded it out loud and was like, okay, Cutibacterium, I wonder, right? And really it's just like, that sounds like cooties, essentially. And so as I started to dive deeper into it, I was like, oh, there's something here that I really, really am interested in, that I would love to explore. What is the story around this? And so, I sort of went to my actual books, and I actually needed to see like, what is all the stuff that I need to know. And so in a slide here, right? Like, this is in terms of storytelling and what we need to know and how you need to know it. This is what we're exposed to. It's just a large block of text from a very dense medical like reference book. And one of like the most popular ones, like First Aid, everybody has it, right? But this is sort of the holy grail, and this is how you get the information. It's just a large block of text, and you just have to read it, try to memorize it, and move on from it, right? And if you were to use an additional resource such as like a question bank, you'll get either that block of text that I just showed you from First Aid, or you'll get something that is kind of like a clinical vignette, right? Like clinical features, pathogenesis, risk factors, right? So you either get like a bullet point list, or you just get a block of text, right? But these are your only options when it comes to actually understanding medical literature, understanding medical education, doing well on your actual board exams. And so, even if you actually get any pictures, often you need explanations of the pictures, because the pictures don't stand for themselves, right? And so for this mechanism, essentially we have, the Cutibacterium. All it does is it roams around your skin, and it will nest into your hair follicles. And then once it nests and it starts eating the sebum, essentially, that it exists around, then it will lead to a immune response. And that immune response is your body trying to fight off the, essentially the cootie infection, and then you develop a pimple, right? And so each one of these last slides, they all say the same thing, but they show it in different ways, right? And so, you have other medical images that like, you'll probably only get this image and then you'll have a huge block of text. So it's like you never really have something that really marries the two, very much like comics or animation. And so for me, what I thought would be interesting is, oh, what does it look like for me to actually redesign characters and or take the bacteria that we have and actually develop characters around them, give them a face, make them appealing, and then have them go through these progressions, right? And so that workflow often is just like you take the block of text from those actual books, you just jot it down and pretty much make a story, and then you storyboard that mess, right? And so being able to take the actual source material and use that as the script for your visualization. That was the insight that I pulled from this whole experience. And so what it looks like, right? So if you look at, the block of text, this block of text tells you everything that you need to know. This is the script, the rough script of like, what is the actual core of this topic. Then for me, I essentially translate that script into a rough storyboard, and so it's, something that gives me a way to visualize without committing too much detail to it. Once I've narrowed down what the composition looks like for that page, essentially I go down and I just, translate it from that actual dense heavy text to something that follows the progression. So each key point has an image associated with it. And then I animate it. And that's the best part, right? Because with augmented reality, you can add sound, you could add interactions, you could add animation, you could add all these things because we're talking about real-time rendering. And so anything that you would see on a screen, you could put pretty much in a book or a medical textbook or anything, and it's all centered around the science, right? And so each one of these things, you could use creativity as a metaphor for all these things that happen, in a mechanism or in a progression. And as long as those metaphors are clear enough to where they're appealing and entertaining, people will make those connections for you. And you can be as explicit as possible, right? And so like having a pimple pop, you can have an explosion because it makes sense and it lends to that.
What if?
And so with it, we sort of have this progression where you go from that dense medical text into, storyboarding and then creating the comics and the compositions, and then ultimately using augmented reality to bring all that stuff to life in the same context. And so you could have a pamphlet or you could have a book or an image or whatever within a book. And that can be the portal into the world or the actual a portal into the world of the actual thing that you're trying to explore. And so what does it look like to roam around the skin and follow the cootie on its progression so that it leads to this immersive experience where, a pimple pops right in your face and it comes off the page and, you need to avoid any of the, the collateral damage that comes from it. Right. And so being able to integrate all the human senses into one experience so that you have a immersive learning experience. That's what this is all about. Whether it's creating interactions, whether it's adding sound to, have your eyes and your ears, be connected in one visual experience, or, just being able to visualize things that otherwise just literally just dense blocks of text, being able to visualize those things from sentence to sentence and point to point. All those things matter when it comes to trying to be, pass a board exam or try to, get on to the next phase of your your educational journey or whatever. And so, for me, my production workflow is like pretty simple, right? And this stems from my experience of being an animator and being able to a visual storyteller. And so I often just start by just doing my research, right? So I'll take all the information I need from practice questions or textbooks, and I'm just studying, right? I just need to study. Then, I will sort of jot notes down of the key points and what could be an outline or a script. And I'll see where characters can be extrapolated or be used as metaphors for these various conditions or these various things. And then I'll go on and I'll storyboard and I'll illustrate these things. And it's really like, trying to get each sentence or each point and visualize each of those points so that nothing is left to interpretation. And then from there, after you storyboard everything and you ink it, then you do the in-betweens and you add sound and you do all that, you animate it. And you just do a regular animation product, like animation workflow of just trying to make it seem as smooth as possible within reason. And then using Unity and all the animated elements and the sound design and all the UI stuff, then you augment it. And so it's going from like studying to writing to illustrating to animating to augmenting. And that progression for me is often what I do with a lot of the work that I do. And so all I'm doing is changing the core topic from for the core just sort of you know the core, yeah, I guess the core topic, whether it's cooties or it's high blood pressure or any of those things, like the same workflow, but just the different things that I'm talking about will change. And so for the most part, like that's a lot of the work that I do as a neuroscientist now and a medical student is taking the things that sort of impact our lives, whether it's healthcare or health literacy or different disease progressions or neuroocular diseases, and I try to find ways to incorporate cartoons and try to find ways to incorporate comics, augmented reality, virtual reality interactions to make things a lot more accessible to understand, and then ultimately, when people learn about it and they know how to navigate it, then those that want to learn how to create that stuff, then I sort of use these as pipelines to allow people to learn and create as well.
Want to check out more from the AWE Nite Orlando Immersive Intelligence Lab? Watch more talks and presentations from our incredible XR plus AI innovators. Thanks for watching, and please leave a like.
Nite Orlando.